Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We are here for another one of your questions about work. And this is one that we've been experiencing ourselves a lot in the last few days. For those of you who are here for the first time, I'm Roy. I'm a startup investor in the future of work, and Sydney is my teammate. And we've been talking about this in the context of what's been happening in Ukraine. Where, honestly, for so many people who are affected by friends or family or just reading the news and being terrified about what's happening. I mean, a founder in our portfolio texted me like, are you worried about this nuclear meltdown thing? And it's like, yeah, of course, but I'm not really an expert on like whether rocket strikes on a nuclear power plant are going to cause a meltdown or not. And so the question is both productivity wise, how do I get work done when there's a crisis on? And also just in terms of like being all right with myself, like what's the right thing to do when there's a crisis going on? And Sydney would love any reflections you have on that.
Sure. So I think one of the most important pieces, speaking from an internal, so when we're talking about our team, it's really just important to continuously check in, right? So I think that there is a responsibility of the leadership within any team organization to have a continuous check-in point on whatever the global crisis is, because it's not just a one and done. It can't just be one email or one Slack message or one phone call. It really has to be a conscious effort to continue to check in and follow up on points that might have been brought up in the past. And then this also trickles out externally as well, right? So for our customers, which are our founders, maybe people who are listening have clients or they have external offices that they work with on a continuous basis. When any of these global crises are happening, it's important to remember that it's happening to all of us. And so being able to open up the door to conversation and just invite it and say, hey, how are you doing with this? Is this affecting you in any adverse ways? Is this affecting your work in any adverse ways? Where can we step in and help? And I think most of us would be surprised that just having that bit of acknowledgement will really relieve a lot of the anxiety that we might personally be having, and also relieve a lot of the anxiety we might have that maybe our performance isn't, great. I know there are times in my life where I've struggled and I've reached out to you, Roy, and said like, hey, I realize I'm really dropping the ball this week. And you've said back to me like, hey, I actually haven't really noticed any of that. And that comes up with any type of anxiety, including one that's happening on a global scale. So it's just super important to check in with the
Yeah, I
people.
mean, that form of check-in, I think that the action I hear you describing is an action of curiosity, of like noticing what you're experiencing yourself. It's like, oh, I'm distracted by this. Asking those around you what they're experiencing and narrating what you're experiencing. And then, the way we did with our customers, founders, is ask them what they're experiencing and then play that back to them and then share resources with each other. So I think that there's a temptation when these distractions come up to tune them out.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, is not the most productive thing a person can do, either in terms of getting past it or getting work done, because eventually that'll just escape. That steam exists somewhere and will escape. The other temptation is to pivot on a dime and make your entire job all about sending out, Ukraine fundraising links. And I think that's a timing and dosage question where, if you're Ryan Peterson and you're the head of Flexport, and Flexport has a significant role to perform in how it helps with sending out supplies, because that's what they do in Ukraine, well, then it may be appropriate that it becomes, I don't know if it's been all consuming for him, but my guess is it's been pretty consuming for some period of time. And some of that is what is feeling out what's appropriate given the role you have and what you do. And obviously it also depends personally. Like if you've been more personally affected, people are going to understand. If you're, Russian and you have family in Russia, that you're going to be experiencing this differently than me, who has like, great grandparent history in Russia, grandparent history in Russia, grandparents born in Russia. But other than that, not as personally and directly affected. And so there's a timing and dosage element to this too. But I do think the core principle is to investigate yourself and others, and then just allow for the fact that some response is critical. And as you said, there's this sort of frequent intermittent checking in that's part of that. It's not like, hey, we did that Ukraine email piece. Right. It's more like, nah, it's 2-3 days later. What's going on now? Because we just don't know. We just don't know. I mean, I remember all the people who were like, here's our COVID plan a week into COVID. It's like, yeah, was that your plan? Seems like the world had something else in store for you, and we just don't know.
Right.
So,
And Yeah. And I think to that point, like this is the whole part of leaning into empathy, right? We can't mute it out. We can't turn away from it, because when things do change on a dime, as we've experienced with the COVID pandemic, it's much easier to be prepared for those really sudden changes if you've done the homework waiting for that time to come, right? And when it doesn't come, it can feel exhausting that all that time was spent. And when it does come, so grateful for everyone that within our team at least has a cadence on what's happening. It
Prepared for
just
the work.
together.
Totally.
Hmm.
And you get better at it. Unfortunately, we've had no shortage of crises, so you do get better at it.
Yes.
Any parting thoughts?
I don't think so. Just hang in there, everyone. We're
Hang
doing
in
the best
there.
everyone
And
else
I'll
is.
just say, we've answered some related questions in the past, including, how do you handle it when you're the CEO, about when your employees want to get involved. You can find all of our past episodes at thisisnotadvice.work. And we get our questions from you and the things that we do our own listening. And sorry, my dog keeps coming up to me and trying to get my attention. This is not advice, because we're not saying what you should do with your life. We're relating our experiences with our own. So thank you, everybody. And to be continued, if I can hit the mouse button with my